Welcome to Study Wind, where we make learning a breeze. Today we will be looking at reciprocal graphs. So a reciprocal graph is a graph which has something to the power of -1. For example, y equals x to the power of -1. That's an example of a reciprocal graph. And a reciprocal graph looks somewhat like this. You'll notice that the graph's shape is curved, sort of like a quadratic graph, except the lines of the graph tend towards y equals 0 and x equals 0. That means that the lines of the graph keep getting closer to the line x equals 0 and the line y equals 0, but they'll never be able to touch it. Why? Because y equals 1 over x. So let's take the line y equals 0. As you get smaller and smaller, you get 1 over smaller and smaller numbers. 1 over 0.1 is 10, 1 over 0.01, 100, 1 over 0.001, 1000, etc. But to be able to get to the line y equals 0, you would have to have 1 over 0, which is impossible. 1 over 0 isn't a number, so x equals 0 isn't a valid input. Therefore, the line cannot touch y equals 0. It's the same with the x-axis. You get larger and larger numbers, but to make x touch 0, then you'd have to have something so large that when 1 is divided by it, it becomes 0. But what's 1 divided by something can't be 0, unless that something is infinity, and infinity can't be a number. So, y equals x to the power of -1 will have asymptotes at y and x equals 0. So this comprehension test will be just about drawing the graphs, because these graphs have a rather odd shape, and the quadrants they're in, the sections of the graph, sometimes change. So draw the graph of y equals 2x to the power of -1 plus 5. So this graph will have an asymptote at 5 instead of 0. X equals 5. It will still be y equals 0 for the other asymptote. You'll also notice that the curve goes far closer to 5 than it went to 0 in the example question. So let's take another look at the example question. Here is the example graph, and you'll notice that it's a lot thicker than the other graph. And that's because this graph is 2x to the power of -1, which exacerbates the difference in the curve. Question 2. Draw the graph of y equals -3x to the power of -1, -3. So here, you have the graph tending towards -3, but you'll notice that the quadrants therein have changed. So previously in the graph, you'll notice that it was in the top right quadrant and the bottom left quadrant, but because it's negative, it has moved to the top left quadrant and the bottom right quadrant. Question 3, the last question. Draw the graph of 6x to the power of -2 plus 12. So you'll notice that, as always, it tends towards 12, because 12 is the number added, the y-intercept. But in this graph, both the lines are on the same place, because it's x to the power of -2. Because any negative number is positive when squared. So if x were to be -20, you would still have a positive y. That's all for today. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more maths videos.